What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake and Kyle coming at you today with our first of the year, Kyle. We're going to do an NFL mock draft, and we're going to do a few of these videos here throughout the offseason leading up to the actual NFL draft, which we will be at in Las Vegas. Definitely looking forward to that. Combine right around the corner. You know what? We're going to be there also. Definitely looking forward to that. And so we've put together a mock draft here this week that we're going to be discussing of kind of where pieces are going to be falling. Now, in this episode, we're not going to project any trades or anything crazy as of right now, but we will be doing that later in the future. So if you're new here, hit the subscribe button. Kyle, are we ready to go through a mock draft of all 32 teams?
We're ready to do mock draft 1.0. That's right. Just the initial mock draft. No trades. Nothing crazy with this one. Trust me, we're going to talk about a lot of things with this draft. I think this draft is going to be very interesting. There's a lot of things at play right now. But, I mean, we're a week away from the combine as of right now. So we're going to be there covering those players. We get to dive in a little bit more on those. We're going to see our big board shift a little bit. We're going to see maybe some of these draft slots shift a little bit as well with some trades. But this one, we're going to keep it nice and easy, roll through some team needs, why certain players are where they're at on the board, and just kind of roll with what we think might end up happening based on the teams, not necessarily what we want to happen.
Right, exactly. And you just mentioned it with the combine right around the corner. This board is probably going to shift a little bit. I mean, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, you guys were wrong in your mock draft 1.0. Well, that's why we're going to do a lot of these to really try to dial things in. And like usual, we're not going to waste a whole lot of time. We're going to get right into it. And number one overall, is it really a surprise, Kyle? We still have Joe Burrow, quarterback LSU, even though there's been reports here and there that he may not really want to go to Cincinnati.
Yeah, he's number one overall. And if Cincinnati does anything other than take Joe Burrow number one overall, I think they've made a huge mistake. Now, a lot of people may not consider him to be the number one overall quarterback in this class, and we'll talk about that here in a couple of minutes. But with Joe Burrow, he's coming off a fantastic season, most passing touchdowns in a season, national championship, Heisman. I mean, everything that you could want from a number one overall pick. Cincinnati needs a quarterback. They're going to go with Joe Burrow here.
Yep, absolutely. As of right now, that's the way I see it also. All right, number two is somebody who's pretty solidified at this position here in a lot of mock drafts you're going to see floating all over the interwebs. It's Chase Young, edge rusher out of Ohio State, going to the Washington Redskins here, number two.
Yeah, Washington needs a lot of different positions. They probably don't need to have an edge rusher. Chase Young, though, is probably my number one overall player in this draft. So after Joe Burrow comes off the board, Chase Young seems like the best case scenario here for the Washington Redskins. It's hard to pass on a guy of this much talent. Now he could end up falling if there's some trades. Again, we're not doing any trades here. There is a possibility we see some teams move. Washington could move back. Detroit could move back. Teams like the Dolphins, the Chargers, the Panthers, the Raiders, lots of different teams could end up moving up as well. But as of right now, Chase Young, if you get the number one or number two overall pick and you can get the number one overall player, you roll with it.
Yep, absolutely. Number three, maybe somebody who's near and dear to your hearts. Don't worry, they won't take a tight end from the first round this year. It's the Detroit Lions, Kyle. And right now we have Jeffrey Okudah, the defensive back out of Ohio State. 2 Ohio State Buckeyes in the first 3 picks. And this guy is, by far almost heads and tails above the rest of the defensive backs in this draft.
Yeah, he's definitely the top cornerback. He might be one of the top defensive backs. Personally, as a Lions fan, I want to see him move back and get Isaiah Simmons. And we'll talk about Isaiah Simmons later. But Okudah is a good pick for them right here because there's a lot of talk that Darius Slay could end up being out of town. If he is, they have to have a shutdown corner, and that's what Okudah can end up being. But even if they don't end up trading Slay, having those 2 guys on the outside, that's going to be huge for them for next season, and a defense that really was very, very bad, borderline awful at times last year.
Yep, for sure. Next up, we have the New York Football Giants. They're at the 4th overall pick. We know they have Daniel Jones. We know they have Saquon Barkley. They have some nice young weapons on the outside, but what they don't have is a solid offensive line. So we got Jedrick Willis, offensive tackle out of Alabama, going 4th overall to the Giants.
Yeah, and there are plenty of defensive options that could go at this point for the Giants. So if the Giants say, we need to focus on defense, that makes sense. I mean, they need a linebacker. Isaiah Simmons could end up fitting that part for them. However, you spent a first round pick on Daniel Jones last year. You spent a first round pick on Saquon Barkley the year before that. Protect your investments. I mean, those are your first round picks the last 2 years. Give Barkley holes to run through, keep Jones off of his back. They need to work on that offensive line. Jedrick Willis is the top offensive tackle in this draft. He needs to go here.
Yep, agreed. Number 5, the Miami Dolphins, who a lot of people thought that they were tanking for Tua months and months and months ago. Well, possibly happened because right now with Tua's injury, we have him drop down to number 5, Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback out of Alabama, going to the Miami Dolphins. And I really, honestly, love this because if they can bring Fitzmagic back for another year, let Tua get a year under his belt, make sure he's 100% good to go. I love him fitting there in Miami.
Yep, I love the fit for Miami too. I think Miami's going to end up needing to move up to get him, though. Honestly, that's where the trades will come into play later on. There's going to be some movement probably at that 3 pick and potentially that 2 pick, especially if some teams are still thinking Detroit might go quarterback, which I don't think is going to happen at all. But the Dolphins, tank for Tua became a thing last year. They didn't end up tanking towards the end of the season. They got a couple of wins there towards the end, drops them back to number 5 overall pick, and they could still get their guy here. 100% perfect for them. And again, you can let him sit for a year, keep Ryan Fitzmagic in his spot, let him play a little bit more, and then kind of go from there.
Love Fitzmagic. All right, moving on to number 6 now. We got the Los Angeles Chargers, another team who we now know needs a quarterback. They've moved on from Phillip Rivers, so they're going to be looking for their quarterback of the future. Could be Justin Herbert, quarterback out of Oregon. And ever since the Senior Bowl, he's been screaming up the draft boards.
Yeah, great showing at the Senior Bowl. And at the end of the college football season, a lot of people probably would have said to you, Herbert probably isn't a first-round pick, maybe late first round at best. But after the Senior Bowl showed a lot of those characteristics, a lot of those tools that made him what was a consensus top 10 pick at the end of his junior year when he should have come out, or when a lot of people said he should have come out. Didn't really have such impressive numbers or tape from his senior season, but that's okay because he's screaming up draft boards now. We know the Chargers are moving on from Phillip Rivers because there's so many quarterback needy teams in the first 10 picks. Definitely think Justin Herbert becomes a top 10 pick this year.
Yep, absolutely. All right, next up, the Carolina Panthers, another team with kind of a quarterback question mark, right? I mean, the reports are coming out that they're expecting him to pass his physical. Do they move on from Cam? That's an entirely different episode. They have some needs in Carolina, and a lot of it on the defensive side of the football. They gave up more rushing yards than any other team down the stretch this past season. So they're going to be looking towards an interior defensive lineman here. Derek Brown of Auburn coming off the board at the 7th pick.
Yeah, if they move up, if we get any sense that they're going to move up, they're moving up for a quarterback. That's all there is to it. Because if they stay here at number 7, they're going to get a really good defensive player. One of their top needs is helping out on that interior defensive line, and Derek Brown does that. Derek Brown, a lot of people are mocking him to Detroit at number 3. He's definitely a top 5 overall type of talent in this draft. So I really like him landing here. And when you play in the NFC South, you better be able to stop some teams.
Yep, that's for sure. Next up, Arizona Cardinals. Last year's number 1 pick, Kyler Murray. He needs a little bit of protection. He needs some help. There hasn't been an offensive line in Arizona since never. There has never been an offensive line in Arizona like ever that's been worth a crap. So and here we have Tristan Wirfs, offensive tackle out of Iowa. Put that dude on the offensive line. Let's get some protection for one Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people mocking wide receivers here, and I don't really understand that.
No.
Christian Kirk is there. Obviously, you've got Larry Fitzgerald coming back for another season. Andy Isabella, a guy that you really liked last year, ends up landing there in Arizona. So they've got more than enough talent at the wide receiver position to be fine there. So why don't you protect Kyler Murray so he doesn't have to run for his life? If you want him to run on some design plays, absolutely, because he can do that. But running for his life away from tacklers is probably not something you want continuously happening. Give the guy some time. Watch him flourish. They need to work on the offensive line this year.
Yep, agreed. And another wide receiver, which you didn't mention, somebody who we were pretty high on last year also, still really raw, but could be the future moving forward after Fitzgerald. Hakeem Butler's there also.
Oh, my boy, Hakeem Butler.
That's right. So
I kind of cooled a little bit, but we'll see.
That's what happens when you don't play. All right, next up is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this is a name which we've already mentioned a few times in this mock draft of a player that we really like. It's linebacker Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson. This guy may be one of the most versatile defensive players on the board. And if he falls to Jacksonville at 9, I think they're going to be pretty happy.
I absolutely love Isaiah Simmons and what he brings to the table from a versatility standpoint. And that's why, as a Lions fan, I would love to see them trade back and get him a few picks after that number 3 spot. But right here, I think he's a perfect fit for Jacksonville if he falls this far. Jacksonville really needs to work on that defense in the places that they need the most help: linebacker, cornerback, and safety. A place that Isaiah Simmons can play all three of. So they can really move him around and do some different things with him. He profiles more of a linebacker. But here's the thing: a lot of people, when you talk about tweeners, they say tweener because maybe you're a little bit in between a linebacker and a safety. Okay. Maybe you're not necessarily big enough to be a linebacker, but you don't fit that safety profile. A guy like Jabril Peppers a couple of years ago was a tweener, a guy that really didn't fit either of those spots, even though he did both in college. Isaiah Simmons is not one of those guys. He is a big, strong, fast guy that just he attacks at the point of contact. Great player. He's one of my favorite players in this draft.
Yeah, and he will be for a lot of teams out there. He's definitely kind of one of the wild cards here in the first half of the picks. Next up is going to be the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, they have multiple needs also, but one of them glaringly, offensive line also. Baker Mayfield struggled at times last season. Nick Chubb was the lone bright spot in the offense. They need to protect Baker a little bit more, get him more opportunities to get the ball down the field to his wide receivers. That's why we have Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle out of Georgia, going 10th overall to Cleveland.
The reason I like Andrew Thomas here is because the pros of his profile, his strengths lie within run blocking. And I think next year, I think we're going to see more of Nick Chubb. And I think that's good for the Browns. I think that they do. They need to get that play action going. They need to get Baker Mayfield on the move a little bit, rolling out of the pocket, things like that. But I think they're gonna look at, let's run the ball more and let Baker Mayfield become a guy that doesn't need to throw it so much. I'm not off the Browns bandwagon whatsoever. They need help on the offensive line. They get Mayfield some help, but that's why I like Andrew Thomas a little bit more right here, because of how good of a run blocker he is, because I think we're going to see that offense flow through Nick Chubb next year.
Yeah, and everybody wants more Chubb. Am I right, Kyle?
Everybody
Likes the Chubb. Next up, 11th overall, New York Jets, Jets, Jets. Another team. We're starting to see a trend here. A lot of teams needing to work on their offensive line. It's not a sexy pick, and a lot of people don't look forward to their teams drafting offensive linemen, especially early in the first round. But this is a glaring need for the Jets. We have Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle out of Louisville, going 11th overall to the Jets.
Yeah, the Jets, I mean, they're going to need some defensive help. But the defense was banged up at times. And then I think the defense even played above what a lot of people expected last year, especially with the injuries that they have. So they could use some help on the defensive line. Wide receiver would be kind of that sexy pick that you talk about, especially because we haven't gotten to any of those top wide receivers yet. So maybe they go that way with Robbie Anderson seemingly being on the way out of town at this point. But again, talking about these teams that have used first round draft capital on quarterbacks of the future, protect them, give them time to throw, let that offense run through them. You drafted them for a reason, now protect them. And that's why Mekhi Becton is such a good pick here, because the Jets need a lot of help on the offensive line, both at tackle and on the interior. So Becton, a guy that definitely could step in and help right away from day one.
For sure. And you just mentioned the wide receiver position and how there's some sexy names that are still on the board. And the next two guys we're going to talk about, they're going back to back. And honestly, I wouldn't have an issue with these guys being interchangeable whichever way they go. First team up, though, and it's difficult to say it, but I'm going to make sure I say it correctly, the Las Vegas Raiders at the 12th overall pick. We have Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver out of Alabama. A lot of people love Jerry Jeudy, and they've loved him for years.
Yeah, and again, like you said, interchangeable. A lot of people have CeeDee Lamb as the wide receiver one. A lot of people have Jerry Jeudy as the wide receiver one. A lot of back and forth. This wide receiver position extremely deep, and we're going to talk about more of that, not only in some videos we have coming up, but again, when we're at the Combine next week, getting a chance to get in some interviews with some of those guys and see them on the field is really going to help maybe separate this class a little bit. But Jerry Jeudy, they need help at wide receiver. The Raiders absolutely need to get some weapons. We don't know what's going to happen at quarterback yet, though. Are they going to try and sign a free agent? Do they make a move? Do they try and trade up? They have 2 first-round picks. Do they try to move up and get themselves one of these young quarterbacks in this draft. A lot of different things can happen with the Raiders, but at this spot, get yourself some more offensive weapons to help out, especially at wide receiver.
Yeah, they definitely need it. I mean, outside of what they had, Tyrell Williams, Hunter Renfro is another name that I like, but he got injured last season. Jerry Jeudy would be a great addition. But then you also mentioned CeeDee Lamb, another one of these guys kind of interchangeable with Jeudy, and he falls to a great spot at 13. The Indianapolis Colts cannot rely on an injured T.Y. Hilton and Zach Pascal, for the love of God, at the wide receiver position. CeeDee Lamb going here to Indianapolis paired with T.Y. Hilton could be great.
Yeah, regardless of who the quarterback is, whether it's Jacoby Brissett or whether it's a Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers is kind of connected to Indianapolis right now. Doesn't matter who it is, they're going to have some weapons. Eric Ebron, he's done. He's out of Indianapolis. So now you got Jack Doyle. Obviously, you got Marlon Mack, but Jack Mother and Doyle. Excuse me. It's been so long. I cannot believe I missed the nickname there. But I mean, T.Y. Hilton, he's not getting any younger, and he's had some injury issues. He's been slowed up the last couple of years. Options are limited. They have to get themselves a big playmaker. CeeDee Lamb is that guy. They could possibly use a little help on that defensive line, but the defense is really strong, and I can't see them taking a quarterback in the first round. So going to go with a wide receiver here.
Yep, love that fit. Next up, 14th overall, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of question marks on what's going to be going on with Tampa Bay here in the offseason. Jameis got himself some LASIK surgery, but does that mean that he comes back as the quarterback this season? A lot of question marks. Do they move up? But right now, we have them taking an interior defensive lineman, Javon Kinlaw, out of South Carolina, and he also fills a glaring need for the Bucs.
Yeah, Tampa Bay, outside of all the interceptions that Jameis Winston threw last year, not bad on offense. Obviously, you could want maybe a little bit more production from that run game. So, do they try and take a running back this year? I don't think so. I think Ronald Jones gets another year, Jake. I'm sorry.
Say no to Rojo, people.
Say no to Rojo. I think Rojo gets another year. But they got to make some stops. The D has to get better about keeping points off the board and getting off of the field. Kinlaw on the interior defensive line here can definitely help stop the run, penetrate a little bit. He's a first round talent. Maybe not, again, the sexy pick here that somebody would want as a Tampa Bay fan, but a guy that would immediately make the defensive line a lot better.
Agreed. Next up, number 15, Denver Broncos. They have some needs on the outside. I mean, they really need an opposite wide receiver of Courtland Sutton. However, they also need some help on the defensive side of the football. A defensive back, Christian Fulton out of LSU, is definitely a guy who's going to be, somewhere on their draft board here near the top.
Yeah, so, I'm seeing a lot of people saying wide receiver to Denver. I don't really love that. I think that they have more than enough weapons there at wide receiver for right now for Drew Lock, because they also have Noah Fant at tight end to kind of give him some options. Philip Lindsay to help in the passing game, Royce Freeman. I don't think they need to use this pick on a wide receiver. What I would like to see them do is spend it on a quarterback, because you got to stop Patrick Mahomes 2 times a year. What are the Raiders going to end up doing? What are the Chargers going to end up doing? You got to stop the pass. And that's something that they need to get better at. So again, the sexy pick here is wide receiver. They could possibly go this route. The thing that I like about Fulton, his best trait is stopping the pass. I mean, he's a guy that can go after the ball, stick on his man, doesn't get burned a whole lot. He has some issues in the run game that he's got to work on, but he's very, very strong in the passing game. I think there's some cornerbacks here that could move around for me a little bit, but right now I've kind of got him in that 2 or 3 range. He could end up dropping a couple of spots, but again, as of right now, this is where I have him.
Yep, agreed. Next up, we got the Atlanta Falcons now on the clock at the 16th overall pick right here midway, and we have them taking edge rusher Clavon Chason out of LSU, somebody who would definitely help shore up that defensive line of the football.
Yeah, Atlanta needs help on defense. Just the last couple of years, defense was supposed to be better than what it was. Now, granted, they've had some injuries, but they need to get better on the defensive side of the ball. Chason obviously brings that on the edge, getting to the quarterback. Again, there, The Atlanta Falcons being in the NFC really need to be able to get after the quarterback, and Chasen brings that, but he also brings that pedigree from LSU. A lot of LSU players, again, off that championship team coming out this year that just have that hard work ethic. Ed Ogeron has done a great job with that class that's coming out this year, those draft prospects. A lot of these guys are going to be really good NFL players.
Agreed. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys at 17. And this one, I mean, it looks like they could be looking for the replacement for Byron Jones, right? I mean, and there's a safety on the board that could really fill that need. We have Xavier McKinney, safety out of Alabama, going 17th overall to the Cowboys.
Yeah, Xavier McKinney, kind of the safety one right now for a lot of people. That's where I currently have him as well. Again, could shift a little bit here in the coming weeks, but that's where Dallas is going to have to get some help. They're going to have some cheap options on that offensive side of the ball here the next couple of years, because they're going to be shelling out a ton of contracts. Already done it to Zeke. You got to give one to Dak. Amari Cooper, Jalen Smith is going to have, I mean, all these guys are going to have to be paid. So you got to get cheaper on the defensive side of the ball, because even if you've got all these offensive players and you're going out and you're scoring points, it's not going to do you a whole lot if you can't stop it. Xavier McKinney, a really good fit to take place of Byron Jones if Byron Jones is out of town.
Yep, absolutely makes sense. Next up, all right, number 18. Now we're coming back to the Miami Dolphins and their second pick here in the first round. And they got their quarterback early on. They got their guy. They got Tua. But what do they do at this spot? We have them taking edge rusher A.J. Epinesa out of Iowa to help them on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, they've got a defensive-minded head coach. So I highly expect them with these 3 first-round picks to kind of split it a little bit and go at least defense on these picks. And with Epinesa being the best edge rusher on the board at this point, you could make a case for Terrell Lewis as well. We'll talk about him in a few minutes. But with him being the best edge rusher on the board at this point, I think that there is more than enough time for them to spend a defensive pick now and then use that pick at 26 for a different player we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I think they're going to go defense here after using that first pick. Now, the one thing is, though, too, if they move up in the first round, they might not have this pick. So they might have to give up 2 of these first rounders at least to get up there.
Yeah, and that's something we'll just have to play by ear as we go along. Next up, the second pick now in the first round for the Las Vegas Raiders. This one's coming from the Chicago Bears. We have them taking Patrick Queen, linebacker out of LSU. And we mentioned a little bit earlier with the Raiders, they have a lot of holes. They have a lot of needs. Patrick Queen could really help them out from the linebacker spot.
Yeah, Patrick Queen, a really smart, high football IQ type of player, a great motor, a guy that really in the middle of that defense can become the commander of that defense, the captain of that defense. And again, with them having a couple of picks here in the first round, already have spent one on the wide receiver position to go ahead and boost that production on that side of the ball, switches over to linebacker now, another position of great need for them. And they get Patrick Queen, who, again, kind of that linebacker one, depending on where you put Isaiah Simmons. If he's the linebacker one, then Queen's kind of that linebacker 2 here in the draft.
Right. Next up at number 20 is going to be Jacksonville Jaguars. Their second pick, this one from the Rams. They got a great pick with, Simmons earlier on, like we talked about, and they're going to stay on the defensive side of the football once again and go after C.J. Henderson, defensive back out of Florida.
Yeah, the thing about C.J. Henderson, he's long. He's got super long arms that allows him to make up for any type of mistakes that he has in techniques. If the wide receiver gets a couple of steps on him, he still has the ability to go up and get the ball at the high point. He can do a lot of things really, really well. The main thing that he needs to focus on, he's just got to add weight and fill out his body. I mean, that's the biggest thing that I see with him. So as we get, again, after you get drafted and you get into that weight room and get on a pro meal plan and you're not eating out of the Florida Gators cafeteria every single day, those things kind of take care of themselves right away. So, he's a really good cornerback that's going to make a lot of really big plays in the NFL.
Agreed. Number 21, the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, heck, by the end of the season, Greg Ward was their best wide receiver. They need some help at wide receiver, and it seems like they need this help almost every year. Alshon can't ever seem to stay healthy, so we have Jalen Reagor, wide receiver out of TCU, that a lot of people may not know of right now, but possibly after the combine, they start hearing a lot more about this name.
He's quickly becoming one of my favorite players in this draft.
Yeah.
quickly becoming one of my favorite players, especially at the wide receiver position. There's going to be a lot of people out there right now that are saying, how do you have him going over Ruggs? Keep an open mind right now. Keep an open mind about Rieger, and we'll get you more information on him and talk about him a lot more. The reason I'm going with Rieger over Ruggs, though, is because Rieger is already a little bit more polished as a route runner. Ruggs is extremely fast, but Rieger is extremely fast as well. This is a guy that could potentially have a quicker 40 at the combine than Ruggs. But he's a little bit better of a route runner right now. He's a little bit more polished. Philly needs that guy. They need a guy that can be a wide receiver one type player right away. Alshon Jeffrey being hurt as much as he has been. Nelson Aguilar is out of town. And again, like you said, basically the entire wide receiver corps just disappeared with injuries last year at the end of the season. Was one of the reasons that the Eagles really couldn't make a run in the playoffs. They didn't have a whole lot of help. So with Ruggs having a little bit more of a limited route tree to start, Rieger is my pick here for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, definitely feels a need for them there at the wide receiver position. All right, next up, you just mentioned this guy a lot. It's Henry Ruggs, wide receiver, Alabama. We have him going 22nd overall to the Buffalo Bills, and I love the spot. I mean, in an earlier video here this year, I talked about Robbie Anderson kind of being a potential, grab by the Buffalo Bills that I would really like a deep threat to go along with that big arm of Josh Allen, give him that speedy receiver on the outside. Henry Ruggs fills that need also if they can grab him here in the draft.
Yeah, probably wouldn't have needed a wide receiver here if the tax man Bob Foster had showed up last year, but he didn't do anything for them. So what was a 2018 breakout didn't turn into anything in 2019. So they're absolutely going to have a wide receiver here, because after Brown and Beasley, you don't have much of anything else. Even at the tight end position, Croft, Knox just don't do it for me. So, but Josh Allen's best asset is his ability to throw the deep ball. We all know that he has a huge arm. He took some big steps this year as a passer, as a quarterback, and I give him a lot of props for that, because I was really on him when he came out in the draft, and I didn't think he was going to be nearly as good as quickly as he has been. So again, no hate on Josh Allen, but if you have Brown and you have Ruggs to pair together and just absolutely blow the top off the field, that's a lot to try and take care of. And then you have Beasley and Singletary as a pass catcher down low. That can make for a whole lot of mismatches, a whole lot of miscommunication, and a whole lot of points for the Buffalo Bills.
Which they definitely love their Bills Mafia. Shout out. Next up, 23rd overall, which is weird to talk about the 23rd overall pick and bringing up the New England Patriots. I mean, usually they're a little bit farther down this list. I'm not totally disappointed in that. But there's some needs, for the Patriots. Usually going into the draft, it's kind of like, oh, what kind of, bonuses can they add in the draft? They have some serious needs here. One of them is on the edge, and Terrell Lewis out of Alabama is who we have going 23rd overall.
Yeah, likely he's being slept on right now because of injuries. The combine is going to be a huge step for him to raise his draft stock, but he's likely to be just a physical specimen at the combine. You're going to see a lot of good things from him, a lot of good metrics. But again, because of injuries, he just isn't as high up on a lot of draft boards as maybe some of us. I really like Lewis. I think he is the perfect fit here for the New England Patriots, to have him on one side and then Chase Winovich on the other side. That defense, you got to continue to make it better. I know that defense was really, really good to start the season last year against lower level talent in the NFL. But when we got later into the season and it started to wear on, you started to see that defense crack a little bit. So they got to get better.
Yep, agreed there. Number 24, the New Orleans Saints. I mean, as much as a lot of people would like to see a wide receiver, a sexy pick opposite of Michael Thomas, in hopes with Drew Brees hopefully coming back and making one more run there in New Orleans, they got to keep him healthy. They got to keep, him protected. So we went offensive line here. Cesar Ruiz out of Michigan going to the Saints at 24.
Yeah, and trust me, I don't have Cesar Ruiz as a first-round pick just because I'm a Michigan fan. There's a lot of outlets, because I even thought about it a little bit. I said, Kyle, don't want you to get burnt putting a Michigan player in the first round. Go check and see what some other outlets have, and a lot of other outlets are kind of saying the same thing. He's got a chance to shoot up the draft board after the combine, especially after he gets a chance to get out there and show some of those physical assets. The one thing with Ruiz is he can move around a little bit. He did that for Michigan. He can play center. He can play either of the guard positions. played not very much tackle. I don't know. I honestly don't. I can't remember if he got very many snaps at tackle. I think it was a quick, maybe couple of possessions here or there. Was mainly on that interior offensive line. But again, that is what the Saints need. They have plenty of offensive weapons right now. They have Kamara, they have Cook, they have Thomas. A guy by the name of Traquan Smith hasn't quite broken out yet. Maybe this is his year. There's really no reason for them to spend a pick on a wide receiver when they could do a little bit better of protecting Drew Brees. And if it isn't Drew Brees and you decide to run with Taysom Hill, which a lot of people seem to think he's going to be the next coming of whoever, not even going to throw names out. I don't agree with a whole lot of it. You're going to have to protect him too. So it doesn't matter who you have playing quarterback. You got to protect him.
Agreed. Next up, Minnesota Vikings at the 25th overall pick. Another one of these teams that needs some help on the defensive side of the football. Xavier Rhodes is a shell of what he formerly used to be. I mean, he was put on the Pro Bowl as an alternate at the end of the year, and a lot of people laughed at it because his year was horrible. But Trayvon Diggs, defensive back out of Alabama, fills a need for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, Trayvon Diggs is a guy. I mentioned it a couple minutes ago where I said this cornerback position can move and fluctuate a little bit for me. Diggs is the guy after the combine I could see making a little bit of a jump, maybe becoming that cornerback too. Maybe Fulton drops a little bit, Henderson and Diggs move up. But the offensive line could be in play here for the Vikings, but it was much better last season. You could see it in the running game. You could see it with Cook, and even with Alexander Madison on the field, you could still see it with him. A much better path to success for them. A lot more open holes, better blocking all around. The thing that the Vikings need to do is they got to limit some of those big plays that they gave up last year. So that's why I think they need to focus on the defense now. Let that offense do what it needs to do. Let them continue to gel. Let that offensive line get better with another year in the league for some of these guys. But work on that defense a little bit more so you're not giving up nearly as many big plays.
Yeah, because that's definitely something they struggle with here this past year. Next up, the third and final Miami Dolphins pick here in the first round. This one from the Houston Texans. And I absolutely love this if it happens. We talked about Tua at the beginning. They got themselves an edge rusher there at 18. And now, quite possibly, they get the best running back in the draft, J.K. Dobbins out of Ohio State, going to Miami. We know Miami has struggled in the running game for years upon years, and I really don't think that the Laird and Savior, Patrick Laird, is going to be the main guy there by any means. But J.K. Dobbins is someone who could definitely fill a role.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the Dolphins address three very important positions here in the first round. That first pick on a quarterback, maybe that's more of a future pick, especially if it's Tua. That's going to take a year for that to come to fruition. But then you get your edge rusher, and now you get a running back to help Ryan Fitzmagic. Dobbins and Jonathan Taylor are going to be very close for me as my running back 1 and 2 on the board. I could see a couple more running backs potentially going in the first round, but I think you see a lot more of them go in the second round. Dobbins, for me, though, he holds more upside. I think he's a little bit more of a dynamic playmaker than what Jonathan Taylor is, and that's why I have him going to the Dolphins here, because I think on offense, they're desperately going to need that. Obviously, the Parker breakout last year, towards the end of the year, you saw Gesicki get a little bit better. Need another playmaker, and Dobbins could be that guy.
Yep, absolutely. Next up, 27th overall, Seattle Seahawks. We have them taking edge rusher Julian Okwara out of Notre Dame. Definitely one of the biggest needs for them here in the offseason, but not one of those sexier picks.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Here's the thing about Okwara. Last year, the Seahawks took a physical specimen that blew up the combine in DK Metcalf. He came with some question marks, blew up the combine, great metrics outside of that 3-cone drill, and look at the season that he had. Okwara could kind of be the defensive comparison to what we saw last year with DK Metcalf. He's going to have an awesome combine. This dude is a physical specimen with amazing tools and traits. You are going to see an awesome performance from him, and that is going to get him that first round status. Remember how excited I was about Brian Burns last year?
Yes.
I had Brian Burns pegged as a top 10 pick, and people thought I was nuts about it. I kind of feel the same way about Okwara this year as I did Burns last year. I don't have him nearly as high, but I just love the motor. I love the tools that he have. I think he's going to be an awesome player in the NFL, and I think when he goes to the draft, he's going to blow it up, have an awesome combine. When he goes to the combine, he's going to blow it up, have an awesome combine. He's going to solidify that first-round status for him.
Yep, awesome. Plus, it fills the need that they have there in Seattle. For Baltimore, up next, 28th overall, we have them taking one of the hardest names in the first round to take. It's Yetur Gross-Matos, edge rusher out of Penn State. And if I mispronounced it, back off my case. It's hard to say.
Well, congratulations, because I think you said it right. So, but wide receiver is going to be a need for them as well. Obviously, you want to give Lamar Jackson tools to win, but the Ravens' best path to the Super Bowl is slowing down other teams, not trying to keep up with them offensively. I think if you're asking Lamar Jackson to go out there and go toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes as a passer, I think you're taking away from what makes Lamar Jackson such a great quarterback. I love Lamar Jackson. I have absolutely nothing against him. That loss in the playoffs was not on him this year. It was on that team as a whole. So keep solidifying that defense. Gross-Matos, a guy that could end up being a little bit higher in terms of the edge rushers by the time the combine is done and some of these pro days are done. I think he's a good fit here. The Ravens have always been known for their defense, so let's solidify that defense with an offense that was really, really good last year. And with as deep as the wide receiver position is, let them get one later on.
And they really don't need it, right? I mean, they utilize their tight ends like wide receivers anyway. Mm-hmm. I mean, they put up plenty of points this year without those added wide receivers.
Yep.
Next up, Tennessee Titans, 29th overall. We have them taking an interior defensive lineman out of Oklahoma, Neville Gallimore, going to the Titans.
Yeah, so he's one of the hardest working players in this draft, both off the field and on tape. Some of his physical tools are not going to overshadow some of these other guys. If you were looking at just physical tools alone, you probably wouldn't put him as a first round pick. He'd probably be more of maybe a late second round pick. However, he is the perfect type of defensive player for Mike Vrabel. He has a high motor. He never gives up on plays. He's always there with a second chance effort. Yes, some of those tools he can get a little bit better at, but Mike Vrabel is the perfect coach for that. And if they can get those tools to match what he has in effort, then they're going to have themselves a really solid player. That's why I have him going here, because of how much I like this match.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Number 30, the Green Bay Packers have them taking linebacker Kenneth Murray out of Oklahoma. Linebacker, not quite an immediate need, but it could be definitely something that they're looking for here in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's the thing for the Packers. You could end up going wide receiver here, right? Because they absolutely needed it last year. They absolutely needed some more help at wide receiver, but they have not taken a wide receiver in the first round since 2002. So if you're a Packers fan and you're watching this, you're probably saying, hey, Kyle, congratulations for not giving them a wide receiver. They never draft wide receivers in the first round. I heard that a lot last year because in one of our mocks last year, I put a wide receiver to them in the first round, and I heard that a lot from Packers fans. But here's the thing, even with as big a need they need at wide receiver and the fact that there's still some really good wide receivers left on the board here, Blake Martinez is an unrestricted free agent. He's the guy in the middle of that defense that really helps communicate and make it flow. Even if he were to return, him and Murray could work together, but they're going to need a leader if Martinez leaves, and that is the type of player Murray will be. He'll be an anchor in the middle of that defense. He'll be the vocal leader. He's a smart, high IQ type player. Definitely a great get for them here at the 30th overall pick.
And you said they could make it flow, but can they let it flow, Kyle?
Nobody can let it flow like right. us. That's for sure.
You better believe it. All right. Just want to make sure you were paying attention. Number 31 overall, arguably the best defense in all of football, the San Francisco 49ers. Didn't quite look like it during the Super Bowl. However, they could quite possibly get one of the top safeties in the draft with Grant Delpit out of LSU, a name that a lot of people may be more familiar with after the national championship.
Yeah, the thing, they could probably use somebody on the interior offensive line a little bit more right here. We saw that in the Super Bowl. It was a little bit of a weakness for them. However, there isn't a guy here that I would necessarily say would be better than a reach. I think if they were trying to go for anybody here, it would end up being a reach. Grant Delpit dropping here, I think he's a great get for them this late in the draft. I think he's a very good safety. Jimmy Ward is going to be a free agent, so does he leave? If he does, they're going to have to be able to replace him. That's why I'm going with a safety here.
Yep, makes sense. Last pick of the first round, the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, 32nd overall, have them taking Jeff Gladney, a defensive back out of TCU.
Yep, absolutely. And one of the names of the games last year for the Kansas City Chiefs, get a better defense, put a better defense together. Patrick Mahomes, he's going to obviously put up a lot of points with that offense. Let's get that defense up to par. They did that. They win a Super Bowl. I expect them to continue to follow that type of blueprint this year as well. Jeff Gladney, grab him, put him on the outside at cornerback. You could see a little bit of a change there at cornerback this offseason. So maybe we see some people shift around. Jeff Gladney can jump in and help right away. And then again, obviously that offense doesn't need any help whatsoever. Yeah, if you're out there clamoring for a running back because you're a fantasy football fanatic and you want to have that Kansas City running back, I just can't see them spending a first-round pick when Damian Williams did just fine down the stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. Their biggest problem is health, but we saw it at times last year. Even when he went down, it's kind of just a plug and play. I mean, they can beat you so many different ways there, especially as long as Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and Patrick Mahomes are a part of that offense. So, yeah, defense is where they're going to continue to focus. But that was the first 32 picks of the first round. This is our mock draft version 1.0. This is going to evolve as we move forward here over the next few weeks. So make sure you stay tuned and look out for these new and upcoming mock drafts. Plus, like we mentioned earlier, we'll be at the Combine. We'll be at the draft. We're going to be doing a lot of coverage from both places. We're going to try to get some questions in there, some interviews in there, try to get a little bit more of the inside scoop so we can bring you guys that information. However, we want to be interactive. So with these mock drafts, maybe you see it a little bit differently. Maybe you would like to see a name fall somewhere else. Put that down below in the comment section. We'd like to communicate with you, go back and forth, and try to figure out that, hey, maybe that is a good fit. Maybe that is a possibility. What needs to happen to make that work? Myself or Kyle will be looking out for those comments. We just want to make sure we communicate with you guys and keep this as interactive as we possibly can. Kyle, I'm looking forward to the Combine. It's going to be exciting. We're going to have a lot of fun. If you're in the Indianapolis area and you're going to be downtown Indianapolis around that week of the Combine, hit us up on Twitter. Both of our @s are right there on the screen. You can see where we are. What's it called, Kyle? What's it called?
Our Twitter handle?
There it is, handle. That's what I was talking about. But there's
both of our @s are
Shut up, Kyle. If you want to come hang out with me and call it an @, just follow us on Twitter and we'll make sure we post them where we're at. I'd like to hang out and meet a few of you guys if you're out there in Indianapolis. It would be a lot of fun. But like I said, stay tuned for these mock drafts. They're a lot of fun. Let us know down below what you think. We greatly appreciate the support from myself and Kyle. Y'all have a great rest of your night.